Thank you. There's no table that hasn't asked a question, Tim. Yeah, we're very egalitarian in this room. Okay, so I might ask for a show of hands of but people. Okay, so we've got 8, 4, 3. The good questions there at the back. Okay, lovely. So lots of good questions. I'm going to go to 8 first because they put up their hand.
Hi, my name's Rory, and my question is, who is keeping an eye on Coillte to make sure that they do it right this time, unlike in the 80s, in regards to biodiversity?
Straight in there. I love it. Man, Rory.
Is that a pitch for a job? Look, I think in terms of doing it right in the 80s, I'm taking your question, and come in if I'm misinterpreting it, in terms of where trees were planted, maybe, in terms of peatlands and things like that. Is that right? Yeah, okay. I think it's important. I'm a forester. I'm a second generation forester. My father was a forester. And he was planting trees for a reason. And a reason was to create a timber resource, local employment as well, and we had to bring back our forests because our forests were pretty much gone in the 1900s. I mean, I know more now as a forester in terms of certain things, particularly in climate and carbon, than he would have been aware of. And I'm pretty sure whoever comes after me, will have more information again as well. So I think we've got to look back at some of the mistakes that were made as a genuine attempt to do certain things, and we have more information now. And I said in my presentation, I genuinely mean it. It's not about what we should have done. It's now about what we do next with the forests and peatlands. We've also got to remember what we did achieve too, though, in terms of bringing forests back to 11% from 0, pretty much. And we're pretty self-sufficient in our wood needs in Ireland as well. What we need to do now is we need more forests. We need more forests and woodlands throughout Ireland. We need them for not only wood, we need them for biodiversity, we need them for carbon and climate, and we need them for social and recreation as well. So there's great potential going forward. We are being very clear in what our vision is, and it's open for public consultation at the moment in stakeholder engagement, where we will then be developing more detailed plans and going through more rounds of public consultation too. So, because it's very important to us to hear, we're managing the state forest on behalf of the people of Ireland, so it's important that we hear from the people of Ireland on that. So, is that?
But does anyone have oversight, Mark, or is that something that Coillte is in a position to better manage now?
Well, we are firstly stating what our plans are and engaging with the public on that. So that's very important. The second thing is we have our own oversight and quality control as well in terms of what we're going to do, and of course there's regulation as well. So we're governed in the same way as any citizen of the state in terms of forestry, in terms of forest regulation as well. So that's how I would frame the oversight. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the hands, and we'll go to table 13, and then I'm going to take table 3 because they also had their hand up, and we've got 5, maybe 8 or 6 as well, maybe.
Hi there, I'm Lorraine, and my question from this table is, how does Coillte balance their renewable energy strategies policies with their biodiversity predicted responsibilities?
Okay, I just need to understand the question a little bit better. So it's the renewable energy in terms of our wind farms?
Yes.
Against?
Your biodiversity responsibilities, your predicted responsibilities.
Okay, yeah. So as part of our vision going forward, one of our goals is to develop 1 gigawatt of renewable energy across the country in conjunction with the ESB. I think that's very, very important in terms of delivering the programme for government and what society needs in terms of renewable energy. Any project will be assessed from an environmental point of view. It's open then to the rigours of the various processes, regulation, and in any public consultation as well. We're looking to work more than ever with communities, making sure the communities are aware of where we're trying to do this and how we're trying to do this as well. So I think really it's two-pronged. One is making sure that where we are looking to build wind turbines, that we're doing that as responsibly as possible, and making sure that we learn from where we've developed wind farms in the past, but also that we're working with local communities as well to make sure that they're fully engaged in the process.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to come over to 4 because they had their hand up at the very beginning, and it's a question that's a bit left of field, so it'll spice things up maybe a little bit. I'll give the microphone to David there.
Hi, thank you. David's my name. Yeah, very, very off everyone else's. First, it's a two-part. Firstly, how did the non-native species of deer end up in Ireland? And secondly, is there enough of a population to potentially introduce a natural predator for population control?
Richard, or sorry, Kieran, yeah.
Do you want to? Well, I'll give the background and hand it over to you. Yeah, I think it's important to understand there are 3 species of deer in Ireland, or on a widespread basis. We have our native red deer, which is more or less confined to Killarney, to the national park and area, and then there are 2 species of introduced deer, which were brought in mostly in the 19th century as part of big estates, like, for example, Powerscourt Estate in County Wicklow brought in a herd of Sika deer to show off, basically, to the neighbours, and they broke out and bred in the mountains. And it's those introduced deer that are invasive, just like the rhododendron and the Japanese knotweed. It doesn't belong here. They don't belong here. And on top of that, they don't... there aren't the natural predators anymore, the wolves, the eagles, and so on, because over the centuries we've exterminated them. I know there are a few eagles back in the country, but nothing like to cope with the deer populations that we have. So we, as a population, have to take the place of the predators. I think your question was suggesting, is there a case for introducing wolves? And I think you'd want to ask the farmers about that, actually, not me. But I think we have to take the place of the wolves, and for the short term at least, and to reduce the populations to a sustainable level.
Spot the headlines tomorrow. Yeah. Kieran, do you need to respond? Is that okay?
No, I think
we've got tons more questions, anyways, and I might have to start bundling them up. But David had a question on 5.
Yeah, thanks. I'm asking a question on behalf of the table here. And it's a bit of a rapid fire one. It says, given what seems to be a high proportion of commercial forests in Ireland, how much profits did Coillte make in the last 10 years? And what percentage of this was invested into native forestry and biodiversity producing measures? How does Coillte measure the harm to biodiversity that the use of pesticides in a typical commercial forest causes? And what actions are being taken to mitigate against this harm?
Thank you, David.
Okay. From a profits point of view, I don't have all of financial information for the last 10 years here, but what we have managed to achieve recently in terms of, from a financial point of view, is a good return in terms of managing our forest estate, and that's very important for a number of reasons. Firstly, we're paying a dividend back to the state from the state assets. The second is that it allows us then to invest, which is the second part of your question, into forest recreation and into nature restoration and into other redesign areas of our estate that we need to carry out that would be non-commercial. So essentially, our commercial activity is largely based on wood and timber wood products, and we're able then to reinvest that in other parts of the business in terms of nature restoration, recreation. So it's really important, because what I've just outlined in terms of our potential strategic vision going forward is a very, very expensive program and resource heavy program, and it has to be paid from somewhere. Now that's going to be has to be paid from reinvestment of Coilte's revenues, essentially from our wood business, but also from utilising public funding where available in terms of some of the redesign work we need, but also attracting in private capital as well. From a recreation point of view, we've managed to achieve that in some of our large forest parks, but also in terms of Quilta Nature that Kieran heads up. This is going to be very important for us to tap into this ESG funding to be able to do some of this redesign. I think the third question was on pesticides. We're always looking for, I would say forestry is a very low user of pesticides, right, in comparison. We typically use herbicide, and which is very, very important. And we cannot create new native woodlands without using some degree of herbicide, which is already spoken about deer, and invasive species. To control invasive species and to do some of the nature rehabilitation, we have to use herbicide. So, but we are a low user of that. When you think about it, trees are the biggest plant around. So it's only when you're trying to establish the small plants very early on in the life cycle that you need any herbicides. Having said that, we're always looking at ways of further reducing that, and we'll continue to do that as well. So we're a responsible user of herbicides. We'll continue to be. We'll continue to look at ways of reducing further as well.
Okay, Mark, might you be able to follow up with us on the profits question? Can we come back? Because we tend to follow up on questions that don't get answered.
It was 420 million.
Do you want to wait, David? Do you want to wait for the microphone?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, just Googling it, it says 420 million. So in order to avoid appearing as a corporate greenwash, we want to see this 35% speculative figure of non-commercial activity, actually be achieved or look like being achieved. So that's the impression that the whole table, it's not a personal opinion of mine, but I'm trying to represent that to you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, David. And recommendations can come forward from the group like that. Liam and 12 has his hand up, and we had a hand up at 2 as well. So I'll come straight to you after that.
Liam's my name. When our massive house building programme gets cranked up, and as it gets cranked up, please God, will Quilter be able to support the needs of the industry with homegrown timbers?
Thank you, Liam.
Rather than imports.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. I'm going to follow up with question 2 straight away. We're bundled questions.
I'll take that question 2.
Thank you very much. Paul's my name. I want to ask Mark Carlin. That gentleman has just taken away some of my question, but the other part is, I remember when Quilter was set up, and it was to produce timber for our native building industry. Are you having trouble getting licenses to fell trees in Quilter?
Okay,
take that, yeah, thank you.
So I'll take the first, thank you for that. I'll take the first question first, homegrown timber. You'll see in the vision going forward in terms of we need to continue to supply certified timber here in Ireland for our house building. We've a target of 300,000 homes to build. It's really critical that we build those as sustainably as we can. I think there's a lot of focus that goes in to, from a climate point of view, into the efficiency of homes and buildings when they're being used, and probably not enough focus goes into the building of them in the future, in the first place, in terms of the embodied carbon. It's clear that timber frame homes are 2.5 to 3 times more efficient in terms of climate and carbon than traditional homes. It's an open goal for Ireland. We only build about 20% of our homes with timber frame. In Scotland, it's 80%. It's pretty much the same society, so there's no reason why in Ireland we can't do that. Essentially, there's no look and feel difference from a masonry traditional home to a timber frame home. So I think it's something that we've really got to grapple with. From the question in terms of have we enough supply, I suppose from a private sector point of view, a lot of our forests were planted in the 80s, 90s and 2000s. So that those trees are maturing now, so that in the next 10 years, our volumes are going to double in terms of what we can produce from our forests in Ireland. So it's a great opportunity for us to use more wood here in Ireland. So there is enough supply. We've got to make sure that we use it responsibly. In long-lived wood products, we continue to innovate, and that we build more of our homes with wood. From a timber and licensing point of view, there have been challenges in the last number of years in terms of licensing. I would say now that we're out of the critical phase of a crisis in terms of licenses for felling, but there are still challenges in terms of licenses for afforestation as well. There's a regulatory review underway at the moment in terms of trying to develop a more streamlined process. And I think that's very, very important, not just for felling licenses and wood production, but also to create new forests here in Ireland as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take up the last question briefly, maybe to you, Ciarán. Something that came up in previous conversations I've had. Could you talk more about Nature Trust and the work that Coillte is doing in that regard?
So, is this microphone on?
Yep.
Very good. Coillte Nature, the area that Mark is speaking about, was set up in 2019. That was the 30th anniversary of Coillte. So Coillte has always done some really good work around nature conservation projects, but it was always in the line, and we felt that if you created something that was dedicated, you could really use the organisation to do big projects. So almost immediately when we set up, we received calls from organisations and individuals who were interested in being associated with native woodland creation. And Richard had mentioned there's a lot of interest in this at the moment. And we had nothing to respond to them with. We had nothing for them to plug in, and I was turning people away. So we started thinking, well, look, is there a way here are we missing a trick here? Is there a way here we could use this sentiment and the finance behind it to make a real difference? So to cut the long story short, we set up a separate company, which is a not-for-profit company called the Nature Trust, which sits outside Coillte, and it combines the public premiums and the grants that Richard mentioned for the establishment of native woodlands with private capital for people who want to be associated with the creation of native woodlands. So all the assets are held within the Nature Trust, and it goes out, it's really simple, it goes out onto the open market, buys land suitable for native woodlands and establishes them with native woodlands and manages them into perpetuity. And it keeps, quite simply just keeps a register of who has funded this, so there's no double counting or any kind of funny business of keeping money separate, so it has its own internal register. So that's all it is. It's a way of delivering native woodlands at scale. Native woodlands, because of their nature, because they take so long to mature, there's no conventional economic argument for them, particularly when you have to buy land. So you're really looking at people who want to make an impact investment. We've been really surprised by it. When we set it up, we weren't sure if it was going to work, if there was going to be any real interest in it, but it's going very well, and we've raised €2 million earlier this year, another 5 just recently, and it looks like money is not so much the issue, it's land constraint, because as I was saying at one table, we have very, very low levels of land mobility in Ireland. Land doesn't change hands all that often. So it's going really well, it's really encouraging.
And so the land is owned by the state through the company, or the land is owned by the company privately?
No, the land is owned by the Nature Trust. The asset is held by the Nature Trust. It's open access, so it's there for public recreation and so on, but it's the investors cede it to the trust and it's held in the trust. And the idea would be if the trust ever wound up, the Constitution requires that the trustees and the directors find another home for them with a similar ethos, so it might be a charity or some other non-commercial use.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have a lot more questions to ask, and with your permission, we will send them to you, and if you could send back answers to our members, and we'll put them in our members area. As you know, we have a very engaged membership, and everyone here is really interested in this whole area of biodiversity. But thank you very much for your time today. Thank you to Richard, to Mark and to Ciarán, and thank you for your presentations and your answers to all the questions as well. Thank you.